The iron rule. Nobody in the alien outpost dared to speak when Commander Lyra entered the room. Her steps echoed against the cold metal floor, and everyone stood still, eyes lowered. The walls were covered in shadows, just like the hearts of the prisoners who lived here. Fear ruled this place, and Lyra was the source of it. Lyra was tall and strong, her blue skin marked with sharp, silver lines that showed her rank. Her eyes were cold, almost glowing in the dim light. She walked with power, every movement controlled. And confident. Even the guards, who were supposed to be tough, stepped back when she passed by. Every morning, the prisoners were brought into the main hall. Humans and aliens from many worlds were mixed together, all forced to work for Lyra. She ran the outpost like a machine. Strict rules, hard punishments, no hope for kindness. Today, Lyra's mood was darker than usual. She had heard rumors of disobedience. She hated weakness, and she believed that fear was the best way to keep order. She scanned the room, looking for any sign of trouble. No one dared to meet her eyes, except one. A new prisoner had arrived just last night. He was a human, taller than most, with short brown hair and scars on his face. His hands were strong, but his eyes were even stronger, full of something Lyra could not read. His name was Ethan, but to Lyra, he was just another piece on her board. Lyra walked straight toward him, her boots clicking on the floor. The guards pushed Ethan forward, forcing him to his knees. But Ethan did not look away. He kept his eyes on Lyra, even as the room grew silent and cold. "Name," Lyra commanded, her voice like ice. "Ethan," he replied, his voice calm. "You are new here," Lyra said. "Do you know the rules?" Ethan nodded. "I've heard them." "Then you know what happens if you break them," she warned, stepping closer. The other prisoners watched, their faces pale with fear. Some had seen what Lyra could do. Most tried to forget. Lyra looked down at Ethan. "You will work hard. You will not speak unless spoken to. If you cause trouble, you will suffer." Ethan did not answer. He just stared at her. It was a quiet challenge, one that everyone in the room could feel. Lyra did not like it. She liked obedience. She liked fear. This human was not afraid. Not yet. To show her power, Lyra turned to another prisoner, a small alien named Piri. Piri had been caught whispering the night before. Lyra called him forward. "Tell everyone what you did," Lyra ordered. Piri's voice shook. "I only spoke of the old days, before the war. Speaking of the past is forbidden," Lyra said coldly. "You will be punished." She nodded to the guards. They dragged Piri away, his cries echoing down the hall. The room became even more silent. Most of the prisoners looked at the ground. Ethan did not. Lyra turned back to him. "Do you understand now?" she asked. Ethan looked around at the scared faces, then met her eyes. "I understand," but there was no fear in his voice. Just something steady, something dangerous. Lyra narrowed her eyes. She felt something new, a small, sharp worry. If this human did not fear her, what might he do? Would the others start to hope, just because of one man's courage? She could not allow that. "Take him to the work lines," she ordered the guards. "Make sure he learns what happens to those who challenge me." The guards grabbed Ethan's arms, but he did not struggle. He walked out of the hall with his head held high, even as others watched in shock. No one had ever looked at Lyra like that, and walked away. As the door closed behind Ethan, whispers started among the prisoners. Who was this human? Why was he not afraid? Could things really change? Lyra heard the whispers. Her hands tightened into fists. She would crush this spark before it could become a fire. No one would threaten her iron rule. But deep inside, for the first time, Lyra felt a hint of fear herself. Not for the prisoners, but for the future she could not control. The day went on outside. The alien sky was red and stormy, but inside, the outpost felt even darker. Lyra stood alone in her chamber, thinking about the human's eyes. She tried to forget them, but she could not. Ethan, meanwhile, was put to work moving heavy boxes and cleaning filthy floors. The guards pushed him, but he said nothing. He watched, listened, and waited. He saw the pain in the other prisoners' eyes. He saw how tired they were, how broken. But inside Ethan, something was burning, a hope, a memory, a belief that fear could not rule forever. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of the outpost, the first cracks in Lyra's iron rule began to show. The human silence. The morning after Ethan's arrival, the work lines were colder than usual. Gray clouds covered the alien sky outside, and a heavy silence filled the outpost. The prisoners moved slowly, their faces pale with exhaustion and fear. Commander Lyra watched them from the shadows, her sharp eyes searching for any sign of rebellion. Everyone had seen what happened yesterday. They had seen Lyra punish Piri. They had seen the new human Ethan stand tall. Today, every prisoner was waiting to see what Ethan would do next. Ethan worked quietly, lifting heavy metal boxes without complaint. His muscles ached from yesterday's punishment, but he showed no sign of pain. The other prisoners noticed. A few dared to glance at him, hoping to catch his eye, but Ethan said nothing. He simply worked, his face set and calm. Lyra's guards watched him closely. She had given them orders, break the human spirit. So they made him carry the heaviest loads. They shouted at him, shoved him, and once even let him slip and fall on the slippery floor. Ethan stood up each time, dusted himself off, and returned to work. He never looked afraid, and he never lost his temper. At the midday meal, prisoners huddled together in the corner of the mess hall, eating their tasteless rations. Ethan sat alone, away from the rest. The others were afraid to approach him, afraid that Lyra would punish anyone who tried to be friendly. But secretly they admired him. A young alien girl named Rena stared at Ethan from across the room. She had never seen a human before. She wondered why this one was different, why he didn't cry out, why he didn't show fear. Her mother had always told her that hope was dangerous in this place. Still, Rena could not stop watching him. Suddenly, one of Lyra's guards marched over to Ethan and knocked his food to the ground. The other prisoners froze. The guard grinned, expecting Ethan to react, maybe to shout or even fight back. But Ethan simply looked at the spilled food, then back at the guard. For a long moment, nothing happened. The whole mess hall went quiet. Ethan bent down, picked up his bowl, and calmly collected the food, piece by piece. He ate in silence, ignoring the guards' laughter. The prisoners watched, amazed by his patience. Lyra, watching through the security cameras, frowned in confusion. She had seen prisoners scream, beg, even fight. She had never seen a human like this, silent, proud, unbroken. Later, while scrubbing the floors, Ethan noticed an old alien man struggling with a heavy bucket. The guards were too busy to notice. Without a word, Ethan moved over and helped the old man lift the bucket. The old man looked up in surprise, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you," the old man whispered. In a trembling voice, Ethan nodded but said nothing. He didn't want to draw attention. Still, his simple kindness spread quickly. Other prisoners began to help each other too. Small acts of courage and care started appearing, like tiny sparks in the darkness. Lyra called a meeting with her top guards. She was angry. Why is this human not afraid? She demanded. Why does he not beg? The guards shifted uncomfortably. He does not talk, Commander. He does not complain. He just works. Lyra clenched her fists. No one is immune to fear. No one. She ordered the guards to make Ethan's life even harder. They increased his workload, took away his blanket, and forced him to sleep on the cold floor. Still, Ethan did not break. He suffered quietly, his silence making him even more mysterious. That night, as the prisoners tried to sleep, Rena crept over to Ethan. She offered him a small piece of stale bread she had saved from her own meal. Ethan accepted it with a nod, his eyes warm for the first time. "Why aren't you afraid of her?" Rena whispered. Ethan looked at her. "Fear is what she wants," he said quietly. "But fear is a choice. I choose not to give it to her." Rena stared at him, amazed by his answer. She wondered if maybe, just maybe, it was possible to feel brave again. Word spread quickly through the sleeping quarters. The new human was different. He didn't fight, he didn't shout. But his silence was stronger than any words. His quiet courage made the others feel less alone. The next morning, when Lyra entered the hall, she noticed something strange. The prisoners looked tired, but their eyes were different, brighter, more alert. They were still afraid, but something new had been born among them, a silent strength, a hope that would not die. Lyra stared at Ethan, her eyes cold and sharp. She promised herself that she would break him, no matter what it took, but deep inside, she worried. She had ruled with fear for so long, but this human silence was changing everything. And for the first time, Commander Lyra was afraid. Testing the human Ethan's silence was like a stone in the middle of a river, unmoving, impossible to ignore. Days passed, and no matter what Lyra's guards did, the human did not break. Now Commander Lyra decided to test him in ways no one had survived before. At dawn, the work alarm blared, echoing through every corner of the outpost. Prisoners woke with aching limbs and tired eyes, dragging themselves out of their beds. Ethan stood up slowly from his cold corner on the floor. The guards were already waiting for him, holding heavy chains and strange tools. Without a word, they chained his wrists and led him outside, far from the other prisoners, into a dark building used for dangerous repairs. The air smelled like burnt wires and oil. Broken machines lay in pieces everywhere, and the lights flickered like old stars. "Fix this," barked a guard, pointing at a huge sparking generator. Ethan looked at the tangled wires and broken parts. He knew this job was a trap. One wrong move could mean death by electrocution or worse. Most prisoners would beg to be spared. Ethan simply nodded and got to work. For hours he worked in silence, sweat pouring down his face as sparks jumped from the broken machine. His fingers moved quickly and carefully, guided by his old memories of working on machines back home on Earth. Whenever his hands shook from pain or hunger, he clenched his teeth and pushed through. All the while, Lyra watched on the security screen. She wanted him to fail. But after a long time, the generator hummed to life, glowing with energy once more. Ethan wiped his forehead and turned to the guards. "It's fixed," he said, simply. The guards were stunned. Most prisoners would have been too scared to even try. But Ethan had done the impossible and lived. But Lyra was not satisfied. That evening, she called all prisoners into the hall. Her eyes found Ethan. She wanted to show everyone that no human, no matter how brave, could win against her. "Step forward," Lyra commanded. Ethan obeyed. He was covered in grease and sweat, but he stood straight. The other prisoners watched nervously. The air was thick with tension. "You think you are strong?" Lyra asked, her voice echoing off the walls. Ethan said nothing. She nodded to her guards. "Test him." Two massive alien guards stepped forward, each almost twice Ethan's size. They pushed him down into the middle of the room, then dumped a pile of metal rods at his feet. "You will build a shelter with these," Lyra said coldly, "with only your hands. No tools. If you fail before morning, you do not eat." Ethan looked at the sharp, heavy rods. His hands were already cut and swollen. The guards smirked. They expected him to give up, but as the prisoners watched, something happened. One by one, they started to help him. Rena, the young alien girl, slid a rod closer to Ethan's hand when the guards weren't looking. The old man Ethan had helped earlier quietly gave him a scrap of cloth to tie his bleeding palm. Even the silent, scared ones in the back found Small ways to help passing pieces, whispering advice. Ethan worked all night. His body ached and his eyes stung from sweat. But with each hour, the shape of a simple shelter appeared. It was crooked, not beautiful, but it stood tall by sunrise. Lyra inspected the shelter. Her face showed no emotion, but inside, anger burned. Ethan had not just finished the test, he had inspired others to stand with him. The other prisoners watched with hope in their eyes. For the first time, they believed that maybe Lyra could be beaten. But Lyra would not give up her control so easily that she ordered the guards to separate Ethan from the others. "No more help," she snapped. "Let's see how strong you are alone." The guards dragged Ethan away to a dark, windowless cell. They left him with nothing but a small cup of water. The door closed with a heavy sound. Inside the cell, Ethan lay on the hard floor, staring at the darkness. He felt tired, and his body was broken in many places. He could hear the sounds of the outpost far above him, shouts, alarms, machines. He wondered if the others would stay strong, or if Lyra would punish them for helping him. But in the darkness, Ethan found his courage again. He remembered the stories his father told him on Earth, stories of hope even in the worst places. He remembered the look in Rena's eyes, the small spark of hope she had found. He realized Lyra was wrong about fear. Fear might break a person, but hope could make them stronger. Even here, hope was spreading like fire. Outside the cell, Rena and the other prisoners whispered Ethan's name. Even in silence, even locked away, he was becoming their symbol, a human who refused to be broken. Even by the worst that Lyra could do. And as the night grew deeper, Lyra lay awake in her own quarters, haunted by the idea that maybe, just maybe, the real test had only just begun. The crack in her control the next day, the outpost felt different. Even the machines seemed quieter, as if they were waiting for something to happen. The prisoners moved carefully through the halls, glancing over their shoulders, listening for the sound of Lyra's boots. But deep in their hearts, a strange energy had started to grow. In the windowless cell, Ethan sat on the cold floor, his back against the wall. His wrists were sore from the tight chains, but his spirit stayed strong. He remembered the faces of the prisoners who had helped him, the fear in their eyes slowly turning into hope. Ethan promised himself he would not let them down. Meanwhile, outside, Rena stood near the food line, holding her empty bowl. She noticed the guards were not paying attention. Maybe they were tired, or maybe something else was in the air. Rena leaned toward an older prisoner, whispering, "He's not broken. He's still fighting." The old man nodded, a spark in his tired eyes. That morning, Lyra walked into the main hall, her cloak swirling behind her. The prisoners fell silent, as always, but Lyra could feel the difference. They were still afraid, but their eyes were not so empty now. She frowned, sensing something had changed. She called the prisoners to attention and gave orders in her usual sharp voice. But today, she heard whispers when her back was turned. When she shouted at one group to work faster, they obeyed, but not with the same fear as before. They worked together, quietly supporting the slowest and weakest among them. In the control room, one of the guards watched the security screens. He saw two prisoners share a piece of bread. Another pair worked together to fix a broken cart, helping each other without speaking. The guard reported this to Lyra, expecting her to be pleased that rules were being followed. Instead, Lyra felt a cold chill. She realized the human's courage had started to spread even when Ethan was locked away. "It is like a sickness," she muttered to herself. "A sickness I must cure." Later that afternoon, Lyra ordered a surprise inspection of the sleeping quarters. She hoped to catch the prisoners breaking rules. Instead, she found their bunks clean and their eyes watchful. They answered her questions with respect, but not with fear. Some even looked her in the eye, something no one had dared before Ethan came. Lyra's anger grew. She ordered double shifts, less food, more punishments. But it only made the prisoners work together more. Rena shared her bread. The old man taught others how to hide small supplies. Quiet acts of kindness became common, and hope grew stronger every day. Late that night, as the guards dragged Ethan from his cell for more punishment, Rena saw him. Even with bruises on his face, Ethan smiled when he saw her. He lifted his chained hands and Rena noticed something. Even the guards looked tired. Even the guards looked unsure. Back in her private room, Lyra stared out the window at the stormy alien sky. She thought about the stories she'd heard about how fear controlled even the strongest armies. But now, her own rule was slipping. She could feel it in the way her guards hesitated, in the way the prisoners whispered behind her back. She remembered her old training, how her teacher said a leader must be obeyed, not loved. But now she wondered, what if fear wasn't enough? What if hope was stronger than pain? The next morning, Lyra made a decision. She gathered the prisoners in the main hall, her eyes blazing with anger and pride. "There will be no more kindness," she announced. "Anyone caught helping another will be punished with double work. There will be no exceptions." The hall went silent. For a moment, Lyra felt victorious. But then, Rena stepped forward. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was clear. "We are not afraid," she said quietly. Lyra stared at her in disbelief. Another prisoner joined Rena, then another. Soon, dozens of prisoners stood together, side by side. Even a few guards looked away, ashamed. Ethan, standing at the edge of the crowd with his bruised face and chained hands, looked at Lyra. He didn't say a word, but his silence was louder than any speech. Lyra realized in that moment that her rule was no longer unbreakable. The first cracks had appeared, and they were growing. As she left the hall, Lyra's heart pounded. She was losing her grip, and she knew it. And in the darkness of her private room, for the first time since she became commander, Lyra felt alone. The confrontation, the outpost woke to the sound of alarms. Sirens echoed through every hall. Prisoners and guards rushed to their posts, confused and scared. Something was wrong. Something big was about to happen. Commander Lyra strode into the main hall, her cloak swirling, eyes burning with anger and fear. The guards followed her, their faces tense. They sensed that Lyra was no longer sure of her power. The prisoners gathered in the hall, whispering to each other, their hope growing like a rising tide. Ethan stood near the back, his hands still bruised and his clothes dirty, but his back was straight and his eyes calm. The chain on his wrist rattled, but he didn't care. Rena stood beside him, along with other prisoners, old and young, alien and human. They no longer looked beaten. They looked ready. Lyra climbed onto the raised platform at the front of the hall. She stared at the crowd. No one looked away. For the first time, she realized she was facing not just a room full of prisoners, but an army of souls standing together. "Enough!" Lyra's voice cut through the silence. "You all think you can stand against me. You forget who controls your food, your work, your very lives. You," she pointed at Ethan, her finger shaking slightly, "step forward." Ethan walked slowly to the front. Every step felt like thunder in the hall. He stopped in front of Lyra and looked up at her, unblinking. Lyra glared at him. "You are the cause of this rebellion. You, with your silence, your stubbornness, your dangerous ideas. Why do you defy me? Speak." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. Then, in a clear, steady voice, Ethan spoke. "Because I am not afraid of you anymore, and I am not alone." Gasps echoed through the room. Lyra's face turned red with anger. She signaled to her guards, but many hesitated. Some even looked down, unable to meet her eyes. For years, Lyra's commands were law. But now her power was cracking. "You think these people will protect you?" Lyra hissed. "I can punish every single one of you." Ethan turned and looked at the crowd. "No one needs to be afraid anymore. Not of you, not of pain, not of tomorrow. He faced Lyra again. You can chain our bodies, but you cannot chain our hope. Rena suddenly stepped out of the crowd and stood beside Ethan. Her voice trembled, but was loud enough for all to hear. We are tired of living in fear. We want to live as people, not shadows. Another prisoner joined them, then another, until dozens of prisoners stood with Ethan. Their courage filled the hall like fire. Lyra's eyes darted from face to face. Even her most loyal guard, a tall, armored alien named Var, looked unsure. The silence was heavy. The balance of power was changing, second by second. Suddenly, Lyra pulled out her blaster, pointing it at Ethan. If you do not kneel, I will show everyone what happens to those who stand against me. Ethan did not flinch. He took a slow breath. If you want to rule by fear, you will have to shoot every single one of us. The prisoners stepped closer, blocking Lyra's line of sight. Rena moved in front of Ethan, her small body shaking, but defiant. Others joined, a wall of courage standing against Lyra's threat. For a moment, it seemed Lyra might fire. Her hand shook. Her eyes were wide with rage, and for the first time, true fear. She saw her own guards, uncertain and restless. The prisoners were not running. They were not begging. They were united. Var, the tall guard, stepped forward. He took off his helmet and dropped it at Lyra's feet. Enough, he said softly. No more fear. The other guards hesitated, then followed, one by one, removing their helmets, lowering their weapons. They stood with the prisoners, side by side. Lyra's hand fell to her side, her blaster useless. Her voice, once so powerful, was just a whisper now. You can't. Ethan looked at her with kindness, not hate. It's over, Lyra. You don't have to be alone anymore either. The tension in the room broke like a wave. For the first time, the prisoners cheered. A sound of true freedom echoing through the outpost. Lyra sank to her knees, her rule broken not by violence, but by courage and unity. And as Ethan helped Rena to her feet, he knew the fight was not just for survival anymore, it was for hope. For each other, and for a future that could never be controlled by fear again. Breaking the chains for the first time since anyone could remember, the sun rose over the outpost in silence. There were no sirens, no shouting guards, no lines of tired prisoners forced into work. The air itself felt lighter, as if a storm had finally passed. The main hall, once a place of fear, was crowded with whispers. The prisoners, both human and alien, stood together in groups. Some hugged old friends, others sat quietly, not sure if they should believe their own freedom. The chains that once bound them were now piled in the corner like a mountain of lost memories. Ethan walked through the crowd, his face tired, but his eyes alive with hope. Rena followed close behind, her steps lighter than ever. The scars on Ethan's arms and face looked almost like medals, now signs that he had survived. And so had everyone else. Commander Lyra sat alone on the steps of the raised platform, the place where she once gave orders. Her uniform was dirty, and her hands trembled as she watched the people she had ruled. She was no longer feared. She was just another person in the room. Some prisoners glared at her, remembering the pain she'd caused. Others ignored her, wanting only to move forward. Ethan stopped in front of her. For a long moment, neither spoke. The whole hall seemed to listen. You could run away, Ethan said quietly. The guards have left. No one will stop you. Lyra looked up at him, eyes shining not with pride, but with something softer, almost sad. Where would I go? She whispered. I built this prison, and now I am trapped in it too. Ethan sat beside her on the step. The other prisoners watched, surprised. They expected anger, maybe revenge. But Ethan's voice was gentle. People can change, Lyra. Even you. For a moment, Lyra laughed a small broken sound. Change? I spent years teaching people to be afraid. Now look at me. Rena stepped closer, her voice trembling but honest. You can help us fix what you broke. That's a kind of change, too. A hush fell over the hall as Ethan turned to the crowd. We are free now. No more chains, no more fear. But we need food, water, and shelter. We need to decide what happens next together. The old man who once struggled with heavy buckets raised his hand. We must take care of the sick and weak first. Some have not eaten well for weeks. A group of strong prisoners nodded, volunteering to search the supply rooms. Rena offered to help care for the younger children, while others suggested cleaning and repairing the living quarters. Slowly the hall filled with purpose. The prisoners know, the people began to plan. Some were unsure, but as they spoke, their voices grew stronger. New leaders emerged, not from fear, but from kindness and trust. Lyra watched all this in silence, her heart pounding. She had always thought power came from force and punishment. But now she saw real strength, people choosing to help each other. Even after all they had suffered. Suddenly, Var, the guard who had first removed his helmet, spoke up. I want to help too. I know how the security doors work. We can use the control room to open the storage bays and medical clinic. The room grew quiet as everyone looked at him. Var's hands shook as he waited for judgment. Ethan smiled. We need every willing hand. No one is a prisoner here anymore, not even you. As the day passed, the outpost changed before their eyes. The harsh rules were replaced by shared work and shared meals. The sick were carried to the clinic. The weak were fed first. Doors that had always been locked were now open. Even Lyra helped, quietly at first. She guided a few frightened children through the hallways she once used to terrify others. She found bandages for the wounded, her hands steady now. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She knew she had much to atone for, but she worked harder than anyone. At sunset, the prisoners gathered outside for the first time, looking up at the twin moons shining above the alien landscape. Some wept, some laughed. Others stood in silence, simply breathing in the strange, sweet air of freedom. Ethan stood beside Rena, his eyes on the horizon. Do you think we'll be safe now? She asked. He nodded, voice soft. We are together. That's what matters. Lyra watched from the doorway, her heart heavy but hopeful. For the first time, she saw a future, not one built on fear, but on the promise of new beginnings. And as darkness fell, the outpost was no longer a prison, but a home for all who lived there. The new order, a new day, dawned over the alien outpost. The air was clear, the sky a pale blue. For the first time in years, nobody was afraid to wake up. The halls echoed not with angry shouts or marching boots, but with laughter and soft voices. The prisoners had become people again, friends, helpers, a real community. Ethan walked slowly through the halls, still bandaged and limping a little, but smiling. As he passed, people nodded to him or stopped to thank him. He never saw himself as a hero, but to them, he was proof that hope could survive anywhere. The old man who once struggled with buckets was now helping to lead the repairs. Rena, the brave alien girl, ran after the youngest children, her laughter ringing out. Var, the guard, worked side by side with former prisoners, teaching them to use the security controls for good. And Lyra, once the feared commander, sat quietly in the mess hall, rolling bandages with the other helpers. She was no longer in charge, but she was not shunned either. People watched her with suspicion at first, but every day she showed up to help. She never gave orders. She simply listened, learned, and worked. It was not easy, but slowly, forgiveness grew. One morning, a meeting was called in the main hall. Everyone came, humans, aliens, guards, children. The hall was full, but the feeling was warm, not tense. Ethan stood at the front, still awkward with so many eyes on him. Rena stood beside him, holding his hand. Ethan cleared his throat. We are free now. Not because we fought with weapons, but because we stood together. We are all different, but we all want the same things: safety, food, friendship, and a chance for a better life. so we must build it together." There were quiet nods, even a few tears. The people listened, ready to trust. VR stepped forward. "I used to think following orders was the only way to survive. But now I see that helping others makes me feel stronger than any weapon ever did." Rena spoke up, her voice bright. "No more hiding, no more being afraid. If anyone feels scared or lonely, you can come to me. We will help each other, always." People clapped softly. Even Lyra looked up, her eyes shining. She hesitated, then stood. The room went still. "I cannot undo the pain I caused," she said quietly, "but I want to be part of what you build. I was wrong to lead with fear. Please, let me work with you." A hush fell, then a slow, gentle cheer. The first sign of true forgiveness in the air. The days passed quickly. Life was not easy. There were repairs to make, food to grow, and messages to send for help from nearby planets. But now, everyone shared the work. Nobody was left behind. The children learned, from humans and aliens alike. Songs were sung around evening fires. Laughter returned to the rooms that had only known weeping at night. Ethan sometimes walked outside, looking at the alien stars. He thought of Earth, of old memories, of the strange path that had led him here. He knew he would never be the same again, but he was grateful. One evening, Rena found him staring up at the sky. She sat beside him, silent for a while. "I used to dream of running away from this place," she said. "Now I never want to leave." Ethan smiled, feeling the truth in her words. Home is not a place, it's the people we stand beside. In time, ships arrived, traders, explorers, even rescue crews who heard about the change. When they saw the new order in the outpost, they were amazed. Some stayed to help, others spread the story. The outpost where hope had conquered fear. Lyra became a legend, once a ruler of shadows, now a quiet builder of peace. Var helped teach children about courage. Rena became a leader, her kindness known by all. And Ethan, though he never liked the word hero, was the heart that kept them going. As months passed, the outpost turned into a place of welcome. Anyone who needed safety or a new beginning could find it here. The people built gardens, schools, and a great hall for everyone to share. And on every wall, there was a simple message, a lesson learned by all. Fear breaks chains, but only hope builds a home. Under the light of alien suns, the people thrived, not as prisoners, not as strangers, but as family. The story of their courage spread across worlds, proof that even in the darkest places, one person's hope could